What's up, everybody, and welcome back on this lovely Tuesday evening, right? And let's talk a little bit about, in the absence of these past days where I haven't been able to make videos, right? What has been going on with Manchester United's summer transfer window, right? Because there's been a plethora of news, a plethora of little sound bites and clips given to us by the likes of Fabrizio Romano, right? And I think we should start with one of the really, I guess, one of the sound clips of what I think is the summer transfer window so far, right? And the fact that Fabrizio Romano did say that according to him, Victor Gyökeres, had United won the Europa League final, was 99.9% sure that he was going to be a Manchester United player, right? Now, this to me signals the fact that we still have a chance to sign Victor Gyökeres, right? Now, we've had news come out recently. There was a journalist that visited Manchester United, and he didn't hear anything about Victor Gyökeres. The club didn't say anything about him. So now people are speculating like, oh, we didn't even make any bids. We're not even interested in him. We're not even trying to sign him, right? And I don't think that is the case, right? Because one, I forgot the journalist's name, but I did read the tweets, or not. It wasn't even a tweet. I did watch the Talk Sport show, right, where they asked him the question about it, right, and right, he said that. However, I wouldn't put. He's not the type of journalist that you look at when it comes to transfers and you're like, oh yeah, yep, whatever he says goes, right? Now, but when I hear Fabrizio Romano, right, when I hear David Ornstein, who have recently been, I guess, the two, Fabrizio Romano always, but David Ornstein has come more into play right recently, have been pretty accurate with the transfers around Manchester United. Talk about Victor Gyökeres, talk about the likelihood of signing Brian Mbeumo, drop the news about Mateus Cunha, right? Those are the type of names that I hear talk about something, I read that they talked about something, I watch something that they said, and I think to myself, okay, now I can talk about this because I think there's actually concrete, solid chances of this happening or not happening, whatever the outcome may be, right? So let's talk about Victor Gyökeres, right? Because now that the transfer window has closed until next Monday, this obviously was a little bit interesting because the Club World Cup is happening, and that's why the transfer window opened for these first couple of weeks before the Club World Cup has actually kicked off. What does this mean? Well, I don't think this really has any, I guess, markings on the situation in the sense of, can we still get a here we go for Victor Gyökeres if we move forward with that plan? Yes. I mean, here we go doesn't mean that the player has necessarily signed the contract, right, or hasn't necessarily been unveiled by the club. That can happen at a later date. We've seen it happen with players in the past where, for example, one of the big ones was Paul Pogba, right, who we've had the story drag on for months, and then Fabrizio Romano dropped the here we go, and then we still didn't hear anything from the club for another 2 weeks because they wanted to get all the pictures, all the presentations done. But it was officially, once we heard the here we go, we knew that Paul Pogba was coming to the club. And I think in a similar vein, this could happen with Victor Gyökeres in the sense of we could get a here we go over this little mini pause in the transfer window. More realistically, I don't think that will happen. I think the Victor Gyökeres transfer will happen later on in the summer, right? Approaching probably mid-July. That's just my prediction. That's what I feel, right? Because I don't, right now, I think after we get the Mbeumo deal done, we need to focus on outgoings because we know it's a sell to buy summer at Manchester United again. At least that's what's being reported. That's what we hear, right? How I still don't think we'll see Victor Gyökeres in a shirt until my fear, my concern with this is I would have liked Victor Gyökeres done quickly. I would have liked to have the front three in before preseason, before we go on the tour. And I still do hope that that is a possibility of happening, right? Because I think it's very important that Ruben Amorim at least gets his front line firing right for the start of the season, right? Because I think we'll still do transfers late into the transfer window. I still think potentially there's chances of sending a goalkeeper late into the window. I still think a lot of you guys have said in the comments, oh, maybe we need to focus on the midfield. We need to get another midfielder, and I think that will come with time. This summer transfer window, I do think Manchester United right now aren't focused on that. I think it's in the back of their minds that we need to do that, but it's not really a burning coal issue, right? It's not going to happen, I don't think, before August, before maybe we even start the Premier League season, right? But we'll see how that goes. As for Victor Gyökeres, right, I do think, despite the reports that, oh, Manchester United aren't even talking about him, there's no internal conversations about Victor Gyökeres, I think it's a lot of malarkey. Anyway, I think it's a lot of paper talk in the sense of somebody needs to write a story, get a message out, And I don't think they would tell a journalist necessarily, yes, we're going for Gyökeres, no, we're not going for Gyökeres, right? I think Manchester United are keeping their options open. Obviously, we know the Arsenal Sesko situation has a decent part to play on the Gyökeres decision, right? If Arsenal don't get Sesko or they decide to move on from Sesko and they go for Gyökeres, I do think Arsenal will probably beat us to the Gyökeres signature. In a way, I'm kind of hoping that Arsenal do get Sesko so they can leave us alone, let us have a free run at Gyökeres. Not necessarily a free run because we talked recently about PSG being interested, Liverpool being interested, but I think Gyökeres without, let's say, an Arsenal in the mix is most likely coming to United, and I do think that this highlights the problem that we talked about at the beginning of the transfer window, right? We needed desperately to win that Europa League final, right? Because I think had we won the Europa League final, and Buemo would have been done already. Cunha obviously is done already. I think a Victor Gyökeres would have been done already, and we could have moved on to different targets. Maybe a midfielder, maybe a wingback, probably the goalie, right? I think had we won the Europa League final, we'd be in a much more advanced position than we are now. Not to say that we're in a bad position, right? I'm ecstatic that we've already signed a number 10. I'm ecstatic that we're focusing on another number 10. And I'm ecstatic that we are linked to a striker. And I think relative to other summers, perhaps when Ineos wasn't at the club, we are miles ahead, right? I'm not willing to say that it's a transfer miracle of a window yet, right? It could be, but not yet. I'm not willing to say that yet. But Ineos have done more of an impressive job than I thought we could have done, which is the Glazers. But let's talk a little bit about another scenario, kind of building off of that Victor Gyökeres story, right? With the fact that we do need to sell players this summer transfer window, to buy players, right? Now, we talked about Kobe Mainu potentially leaving the club. Easier to sell than Casemiro. And if we want a new midfielder, we need to sell a midfielder to be able to not only just have the money to buy a midfielder, but also the space for a new midfielder to play. You guys know my stance on this, right? Out of the two, right, we've had conversations about Garnacho leaving. We'd have conversations about Kobe Mainu leaving. Out of the two, I would rather keep Kobe Mainu than Garnacho. I understand there's issues with Garnacho. We'll talk a little bit about Garnacho coming up in the show. But for the Kobe Mainu situation, I'd be disappointed if we sold him. I would much rather sell a Casemiro than a Kobe Mainu because I think Kobe Mainu at 20 years old, give him a new contract, he can still learn, he can still adapt. He's still a young player, right? It's not like he's a young player with no talent. We've seen the talent that Kobe Mainu has, and in my opinion, he's the one that we should be trying to hold on to for dear life out of all the midfielders that we do currently have at the club, right? I think he would be a great understudy to Bruno because, in my opinion, I think we'll see a lot more of Bruno in that deeper midfield role next season. And once Bruno, gets older or decides to leave in a season or two or three, I think Kobe Mainu really shines in that deeper midfield role. And don't get me wrong, he has attributes to be a number 10. I do think he's more of an attacking midfielder or more of a ball progressive midfielder than, say, an Ugarte, obviously, or even a Casemiro. I think that's why we need to keep him. And if we get another midfielder in, I think it needs to be more of the industrious type of midfielder, the defensive midfielder that's going to cover a lot of ground like Ugarte does, but potentially has more of a passing range, can control and dictate the tempo. Maybe somebody around the archetype of a Busquets when he was younger. He could put in a tackle when he was younger. He was more mobile when he was younger. But the Busquets archetype is the type of midfielder that will get the ball, be able to ping a 40-yard pass or play it slow and move the ball around the pitch, right? And just maintain control of the possession, right? And I think, honestly, at Manchester United, that's what we've missing, right? We've been missing that. Obviously, with the Fred and McTominay partnership, those two, if you could combine those two players, maybe we could have had a great player that could have done a Busquets archetype role. If you could combine perhaps a Casemiro, right, his defensive ability with Ugarte's mobility currently and Bruno's passing range, we'd have that type of player, right? Right now, I think that's the midfielder that we're missing, that we're going to be missing if we don't get that type of midfielder this summer transfer window, right? And don't get me wrong, I've seen you guys' comments. We've had this conversation, right? Midfield is a priority for me as well. I do think a striker is more of a priority right now and a number 10 because I think we need to add a lot more goals next season to our attack. But I don't get me wrong, I don't understate the importance of getting an industrious midfielder. But I don't just want another, let's say, I like Ugarte, right? I think he's a good player. I think he can win the ball back. If we need to play two CDMs, we play him and Casemiro. I think it works well. But we need that type of midfielder that can do the Ugarte role, do the Casemiro role, but also be the dictator, the tempo player, right? The Fabinho, the Manchester City had Yaya Toure in the past. Obviously, Barcelona had Busquets. The even current players like Kimmich, right, or even Toni Kroos, right? When he was playing at Real Madrid, right? He was that type of player deep in the midfield that could progress the ball, take the ball off of the back line, turn and ping passes and control the tempo, right? And I think that's the type of midfielder that we need. And that's why I'm sad to see players like an Ederson, for example, from Atalanta being linked to a move to Saudi Arabia. Now, obviously, that move hasn't happened yet. And is there still potential of getting an Ederson? Yes, potentially, right? But I don't think Manchester United are prioritizing that position as much as they should be currently. But we'll see. Let me know that in the comments. Who would be the type of midfielder that you would want at the club? But more importantly, would you actually sell one of our current midfielders to be able to bring in a new midfielder? Because out of our current crop of midfielders, I think quality-wise, Casemiro has the quality to play for us, but I think his legs are gone. And for me, for that reason, that's why I would sell. Out of the midfielders that we do have, a Casemiro would be the one that I would sell. But we did speak a little bit about Kobe Mino. Let's speak a little bit about Alejandro Garnacho, right? And I don't want this to take up a lot of the show, right? A lot of the video, because I've read you guys' comments, especially when I made that video about me being disappointed that Garnacho was leaving and that his comments were warranted, at least. I'm not saying they were right, but they were warranted after the Europa League final, right? Reports are now that he may potentially be staying in the Premier League at the likes of an Arsenal or an Aston Villa. Now, for me, I'm upset that he's leaving in the sense of I think he is like Kobe Mainu in the sense of he can get better and learn the system and evolve with the team, right? But I understand why he is leaving. He doesn't necessarily fit the system currently. He's had a fallout with Ruben Amorim, similar to Marcus Rashford. He needs to leave. Now, if the plan was all along to sell Garnacho, we should have just taken the money from Napoli in January, and I do hope that he still ends up in Napoli or away from the Premier League, because I think he would hurt me more. Not hurt me, but like it would make me more upset to see him flourish in the Premier League for another team when I knew that was the potential that he could have brought to Manchester United, right? Especially if it is at an Arsenal, because I think you add Alejandro Garnacho to that Arsenal team, right? They're lacking, let's say, depth in their wide areas, right? I think. Don't know, he's not better than, let's say, Martinelli currently, but I think he can be much better than Martinelli. I think he'd be on par with Saka, potentially even better than Saka, and I think he would be a great signing for Arsenal, right, to, I guess, push, but for their aspirations, right? But I don't know. For me personally, I'm still upset about Alejandro Garnacho leaving. I've more come to terms, and I do know why. Obviously, everybody knows why he's leaving, but I'm okay with him leaving, right? I would much more be happy. I would be much happier if he was going to a Serie A team or a Bundesliga team or a Spanish team, right? Because I don't want to have another Anthony Elanga situation where it comes back to haunt us consistently in the Premier League. And speaking of fallout, let's talk a little bit about Marcus Rashford, because recently we've heard that Marcus Rashford is not Barcelona's top priority target this summer transfer window, which we thought he was going to be, which is why we were excited, because we know it's a sell to buy summer. We know, say we want to sign Gyökeres quickly, we need to sell players. Now, I think we can fund Gyökeres, say, through the sale of Alejandro Garnacho, because obviously Alejandro Garnacho will be sold. I really did think that Marcus Rashford would have not been gone already, but it would have been much more advanced with Barcelona at this stage. But Barcelona apparently are moving on to targets such as Nico Williams, and more primarily Luis Diaz from Liverpool. Now, is this a bad thing for Manchester United? No, because I still do think Rashford will find a move out of Manchester United, right? I think it'll drag on, sadly, and we won't get the funds from a Marcus Rashford transfer or a loan. I hope it's not a loan, but I hope it is a transfer. We will get those funds later on in the window, I think. I still think he may end up at Barcelona, in the sense of I don't think Barcelona are rich, which means I think that locks him out of a Nico Williams deal. I think Athletic Club will want too much money. And I think Luis Diaz has kind of staken his claim. He wants to stay at Liverpool. He enjoys playing at Liverpool. He doesn't want to move. Does that mean he won't go to Barcelona? No. If he does go to Barcelona, does that mean Rashford won't go to Barcelona? Yes. What does that mean? I think Marcus Rashford will find a move outside of the club. I think he has his agents working on contingency plans, right? Obviously, next year, it's a World Cup year. A lot of players want to be with their national teams in America, in Mexico, in Canada next year for the World Cup. And to do that, you need to play consistently. And Marcus Rashford won't do that at Manchester United. So I think Barcelona or not, he will find a way out this summer from Manchester United. It'll be sad that we can't benefit rapidly from that move, but it is what it is. You win some, lose some. I still think we can get players in, and honestly, right now, the way it's looking, I think Marcus Rashford won't leave until the end of the summer transfer window, and I think outs won't happen until late July. Right now, am I happy about that? No, not necessarily. Right, because I think we signed Cunha. We know we're heavily in talks with Brentford for Brian Mbuemo. We know Victor Gyökeres is going to be the next transfer target after we get Mbuemo, or even before if things work out that way, right? But we'll see how that goes. I think after that, we probably won't get any news on new incomings after those three for a while. I think the club, rightfully so, will focus on exits, right? Getting rid of the likes of Rashford, Garnacho, the midfielder that they want to move on, potentially a center back, maybe a goalie. Well, we'll talk a little bit about the goalie position later, or right after this. But I think outgoings. I'm a little concerned that we haven't had anything concrete on outgoings quite yet. Um, I'm more impressed with Ineos in the sense of their speed and urgency this summer transfer window. I'm not calling it a great transfer window. Obviously, we've only signed one player so far, but I'm more encouraged and had it just been a Glazer summer transfer window. Right? I'll say that. That's my piece on Ineos so far this summer transfer window. But I am concerned that we haven't heard anything about outgoings yet. Now, does that mean we won't have players leave? No, I do think players will leave, obviously. Obviously, players already have left, but players will leave. Players that we know need to leave for funding reasons, right, will leave. I'm not sure when it'll happen, right? I haven't heard anything from Fabrizio Romano or any of the transfer gurus, right? Or read anything or seen anything that indicates that, oh, within the next week or so, we'll have our first player leave, right? And when I mean our first player leave, I'm not talking about like Lindelof being released or Tom Heaton being released, but I'm talking about like a Garnacho leaving, like a Rashford leaving, like a Onana potentially leaving, right? I haven't heard anything, and I do hope soon we will hear something like that. But let's actually talk about Andre Onana, right? Because obviously the goalkeeper position, a lot of people, I've read your comments, I've talked to some of you in the comments, right? Want Andre Onana out of the club, and I understand that. I do too, in the sense of we need a better keeper, realistically. I'm not sure we've heard a lot of keepers mentioned around Manchester United. Right? We've heard Donnarumma, we've heard Kardasecki, we've heard the guy from Torino, we've heard a lot of Martinez. We've heard a lot of keepers mentioned around the Manchester United position, right? The stumbling block is simply that Onana is at the club, is not being forced out currently from the club. And I don't think if you don't force Andre Onana out, I don't think he'll leave. I generally don't think Andre Onana wants to leave the club. He has a contract. He's well within his rights to stay and drag that contract out. And we'll have to deal with that as it goes, right? And I made my short earlier about this. I made a short earlier about this, right? I don't think we will sign a goalkeeper this summer transfer window if Andriana starts in the preseason tour, right? Because in my opinion, if he knows that he's the number one keeper, he's not going to leave because who's going to replace him? He knows that Bayender is not going to replace him. He knows that Bayender is not good enough. And unless we do something extremely ruthless, like bring in a first team goalkeeper with Andre Onana here, I don't think Andre Onana leaves. Say we bring in a Ter Stegen or a Donnarumma, right? And Onana is still here, then maybe it gets the ideas from like, okay, whoa. Now I'm not guaranteed to start. Maybe now I should tell my agents, look for a move, get me out of here. I want to play first team football, right? But I think without that happening, Andre Onana will most likely be our keeper next summer or next season. I'm not ecstatic about it. I'm not heartbroken about it either, in the sense of I think there's more important positions, although I think out of the positions that we need, like the striker, after the striker, I think goalkeeper is the second priority, right? The second most important. Like, I'm ecstatic that we're trying to sign a second number 10, but I think a goalkeeper is more important than a second number 10. Like, I think I would be more happy with a keeper signing than an Embuemo signing. Like, actually, let me know that in the comments. Would you guys be more happy with that? Right now, if we were to pause on Embuemo, I'm not saying stop talking to Embuemo and Brentford, but pause Embuemo. Get the striker and get a keeper in, and then get Embuemo, right? Would that be more appealing to you? Because for me, I think it's striker, then keeper, then we could focus on the rest of the midfielders. But I understand why we are in the position that we are in. And right, I don't think, how do I say this? If we do play with Onana next season, I don't think it'll be the end of the world, in my opinion. Obviously, I know a lot of you will have your opinions in the sense of, yes, it will be, and completely fair. Completely understand that sentiment. Um, I'm more concerned at what's after Onana, right? Because we can't keep buying 40, 50 million euro goalies because a goalkeeper, you bring in a goalkeeper and it may not work. I mean, apart from, I was blessed enough to be, a lot of my childhood was with the David De Gea era, in the sense of I saw one keeper hold the position for a long time. Whereas before that, I've seen, after, say, Van der Sar left, we went through a couple of different goalkeepers, right, until we found the David De Gea, right? Until we found David De Gea. And I think realistically that won't work these days, in the sense of, oh, we buy this keeper, he didn't work, buy a new one, buy a new one, buy a new one every summer. Right? I don't think United are that blessed with money, right? Obviously, but we'll see how that goes. And then one final disappointment, right? Because we've talked about some positives, like Yaker is, and I don't want to be the type of guy that's only highlighting the positives, because there are negatives at the club. Is Jadon Sancho, right? And we'll finish the show talking about Jadon Sancho, right? Because I am very upset that Chelsea didn't want to activate their option to buy for Jadon Sancho, in the sense of, I just want him out of the club. I don't think he fits the system. I don't think he embodies what a footballer should be, the type of player that wants to play. I think he's money hungry. I think he's arrogant, more so even than, say, a Garnacho, right? I do think he has some talent. He's never shown the talent that he had at Dortmund, at United, which is saddening to me, because when we bought Jadon Sancho, I was ecstatic. I was so happy with him. I wanted him for so long when he was popping off at Dortmund, and I thought he would have been transformative, especially under Ollie, right? And it just never clicked. And now I'd rather just see him move on. But he didn't want to take the pay cut to go to Chelsea. He didn't want to. We don't know what his plans are, but I don't think Manchester United can move him on this summer. I genuinely do think the way Jadon Sancho has appeared over his time at Manchester United, I genuinely think he will rather run down his contract, not have a chance at playing in the World Cup next year, and run down his contract and just get paid millions next season, right, by signing with a sign-on fee from a club. Instead of United getting a transfer, I think he'd rather just sit on the bench, or not even on the bench, just sit in the reserves and not even do anything, right? And I think as a footballer, that's sad. From the player's side, from a United side, it's troubling, because I think we counted on being able to move on Jadon Sancho to fund other transfers. But that's, I guess, the one big negative story that I've heard read over the last 2 days. And I wanted to end the show on that. I wanted to get your guys' opinions, right? What are your guys' thoughts on Jadon Sancho, right? Because to me, if we were blessed with cash, if we had ruthless owners, if we had rich owners, right, I would generally be not advocating, but I'd say that Jadon Sancho is the one player that's up for contention to genuinely be released, terminated contract, and just move on, cut our losses. But I don't think that is going to happen, and I don't see where he goes. I don't see a team that's willing to pay that money to United and then give him wages, right? I think at best we'll loan him out and still pay some of his wages, which is, I think, terrible for the club. But it'll be what it'll be, because we put ourselves in a really bad position with the contract that we gave Jadon Sancho. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for being here. If you guys like the video and you guys want to see more long form videos, let me know that in the comments below. Hit the subscribe button if you guys like. We're trying to get to 100 subscribers before the start of the Premier League season. And I hope you guys enjoyed. And I hope I see you guys next time for our next show. See you guys.